Real people, real opinions, real talk radio. The multi-award-winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.
What I'm going to do is I got to move on. And us Irish are always good for a sad story, aren't we? I mean, we do like an old sad story every now and again. And there's nothing sadder than the tale of emigration from the Emerald Isle. Those people who have to leave by necessity. Well, Steve Reeves is a UK filmmaker and photographer, and he's captured the faces of some of the older Irish people who live in London. I was looking at his site earlier on. There's one man who's 93 years of age, and God bless him. He's been living in London for a long time. Anyway, it started out as him having a chat with a person and taking their picture, and then it evolved into a longer conversations and some short videos. The people are all, the people are from all over, but Steve seems to be drawn to the Irish people in particular. So much so, the London Irish Centre recently got in touch with Steve to make a book out of the pictures, which will be released, by the way, next year on St. Patrick's Day. Steve joins me on the line to tell me a little bit more about his work and one of his subjects, as I mentioned already. Sorry, he was 98-year-old man, an old friend, Michael, and he joins me on the line. Steve, hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
Good.
Thanks
Nice
for-
to get to
thanks for
eventually
calling me.
talk to you, Steve. Unfortunately, we were meant to talk to you the other night, but I don't know, there was gremlins in the system or something. I don't know what was happening, but we couldn't get to talk to you.
That's right.
But Steve, it's really interesting idea that you went from, I suppose, chatting to one guy and taking pictures to taking pictures of a lot of people. And why particularly were you drawn to Irish people?
Well, initially I wasn't. It was just, I just where I live is a very sort of mixed up area. There's a lot of different types of people. And just a few of the people I spoke to happened to be Irish, and they were very chatty and very sort of open. And also they have good stories because they had moved from one country to another. So there's always a sort of great story there. And I was then approached by the sort of London Irish Centre, who sort of were looking at all the different stories I've done and said, "Oh, you've got a thread here." And I hadn't even noticed that I'd sort of managed to, out of the sort of 50 or so people I'd interviewed at the time, there's sort of a good sort of 10-15% of them were Irish. And so then from that, I started to sort of look out for more Irish people. And it sort of grew from there, really. So it was a sort of,
And it is
sort
kind
of
of
organic
sad,
thing.
isn't it? It is, because I even remember, not so much the UK, but I had an aunt and uncle went to America because my uncle worked on the Cunard lines at the Queen Elizabeth. And this was back in the 1940s. And he got married and went to Manhattan, lived in Manhattan, had 2 kids. But anytime I visited him, he'd always say, "Oh no, we're coming home. Oh no, we're not staying here." They never even got an American passport because they intended to come home. Now, they did come home eventually when they were 80 years of age in a box, sadly. But they always intend to go home. There's always an intention. And I don't know if that was a thread amongst the Irish people that you spoke to. I'm only here temporarily. I am going to go home. I'm going to go back to Ireland at some point.
Very much so, yeah. And it's an interesting thing because some have sort of, after a few years, they sort of get a family, they get married, have children, and then they've got that tie of their children, so they want to be around their kids or their grandkids, so they don't go back.
Yeah.
And then some do go back, and a few have been back and not really felt as at home as they would like to have felt, and have come back to England again. So there's a sort of, I think your heart, you don't really know. I mean, Michael, I did this little video of Michael, and I took him to Dublin, and this is the 98-year-old. And I interviewed him sort of briefly at the Dublin airport as we were about to fly back to Gatwick. And he just said, I don't think I loved being in Dublin, but it didn't feel like my home. And he said, but actually London doesn't feel like my home either. So there's a sort of...
Yeah, he looks well, by the way, he looks well for 98, in fairness to him.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah,
here's a little
tough guy.
tiny clip of Michael. Hang on.
Maybe I've been away from Dublin too long. Here, I would be as much a stranger as I am in London, wouldn't I?
He's got a good English accent now on him. I can tell you. There's a little strand of the Irish accent still in there, but he's a bit of an English accent there. He's been there for so long. And he's well looked after by the looks of things, and he seems to have a nice little quiet life on his own, looking after himself,
Yeah, well, I think, the council have really let him down, but we're sort of, thanks to social media, a lot of people have got involved and started to help him out a bit, and he wants to be independent. He won't go into a care home because he went to Artane. He can't bear the thought of ending his life in an institution because he spent so long in one.
We were only talking about Artane earlier on the show, actually, coincidentally, Artane School, Artane Boys School. And I know you look after him as well yourself.
Well, I live so close. I met him at a bus stop about a year and a half ago. And now I feel guilty if I walk past his flat without sort of popping in or taking him for a pint or, taking him for a haircut or something. I can't just leave him sort of. I know he's just sitting in there on his own. He's got no relatives. So you kind of feel a bit sort of, I don't know, I feel a bit committed to him really now,
He looks like he likes a pint of Guinness, by the way. You can see.
He does, yeah. He can do a couple of pints at 98, which is pretty impressive,
Yeah, put you under the table probably as well at 98.
Well, yeah.
What other characters have you met? What other Irish characters? And what were the reasons that they went to England? I'm assuming it was for better life at one point.
Nearly all of them. I've put them on my website. I've put them together now. I've got about 25, 30. Nearly all of them was because there was just no work. There was a couple that went. One woman went because she just wanted to have some fun. She said my parents were much older than me. They were very strict. I wanted to come to England and have some fun, and she did. And she has no regrets at all. But the majority have said, if I hadn't come to England, I'd be in Ireland. And they actually use the word, they say, I'll be eating grass. Some of them have used that as an expression, It's changed. And it's so important to me to capture these stories because I live in an area, sort of Clapham in London, and there's a lot of Irish people there now. But they're young, really highly educated, very successful young people. They're working in sort of Old Street around in the sort of technology sectors and stuff. And they're very, very different to their sort of forefathers who came over to sort of dig the roads or work as nurses.
It was
it's a very interesting change.
When people went to England, 50 years ago or 60 years ago, it was a big deal. You might as well have been going to Australia. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you had to go by boat. You had to go by, you couldn't afford to go by plane, most people. It was by boat. And it seemed far away. Now, of course, it's as easy for me to fly to London as it is to drive up the road. I get there in half an hour if I go CityJet or whatever it is. So, it seemed like a long way away 50 years ago because everywhere was a long way away. But now it's so different. So for those people, that was a big adventure. It was, I'm going off to London to see the Queen. And it was a big adventure to go to England and set up a new life.
Absolutely. And it was... Of course, there's no mobile phones. There are people who have said to me, we got the train down to Euston, and I got nervous as I got closer and closer to Euston, thinking, is my brother going to be there? Otherwise, I'm going to turn up in the middle of London with nobody. Yeah. And they were often they had someone to meet them. There was a lady I interviewed the other day who was a nurse, and she was working at a hospital that was like literally 5 minutes from Euston, but she was so overwhelmed coming into this big station. She was a country, I think she was a Mayo from the country, and she said it was just so overwhelming that all she could do was get into a taxi, and the taxi driver said, it's just there. But she was so scared about walking through Euston Station because she'd never seen so many people,
Yeah, because of course at that time, I think, it's still now, I suppose, although Dublin is a lot more metropolitan now than it would have been then. London seemed like this big metropolitan city, but it was kind of, to us, seemed overpopulated, with too many people. And I even remember as a kid, I had relations in Middlesex, and we went over as kids over to London, and we'd be brought into London town. And I remember how busy it looked and how big it looked and how big it felt. But I don't see it like that now. But it seemed like a different world, and culturally it felt different, even though it really isn't.
Yeah, I think the Dubliners, people like Michael, were a lot more relaxed coming to London than the people who've come from places in the middle of nowhere. That must have been. There was one guy that said they ended up in Tottenham or somewhere, and it was two young blokes in their 18, 19, and they said they got to this house and they went out at night. And they just couldn't believe that he said, oh, your face looks all funny. He said, what do you mean? And it was the orange light from street lights. He said, we'd never really seen that many sort of street lights before. It was It was so, and they were so scared. They said we walked about 200 yards and then we just went back to the house with him because we just felt like such a sort of weird place to see, to be in the middle of sort of Tottenham, which is incredible when you think about it,
And you don't just get their story, because I'm looking at your website, I see a nice picture there of Michael holding up a picture of it, which I assume is his mother, and pictures of his wedding day as well, and they're on his wall in the background. So you get to hear their backgrounds, their stories, their family tree as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's some people have been absolutely delighted. There's a guy I did the other day, a 93-year-old. I can't remember his name now, but he was Paddy he was called, and he absolutely so delighted that he came to London. He said it was the best decision he ever made, And there are some very positive stories as well. Michael's is quite a sad story, but he's the one that people seem to like the most because obviously he's 98 and he's still independent, and he's a great storyteller,
And just for people who want to go to your website, it's not just about the Irish, of course. I mean, obviously we're focusing on the Irish, and there's a large percentage of them that are Irish. You also focus on other people who come from other countries and set up a new life in London as well, or in England.
A lot of Caribbean people, and there's quite an affinity between the Irish and the Caribbean. Quite people from the Caribbean. There's a lot of, because obviously there was the awful signs, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. And a lot of the Irish people actually became quite friendly with quite a few of the Caribbean people because there was this sort of slight sense, this sense of being an outsider. It's quite an interesting. And I met a guy the other day. Where was he from? Where was he from? I can't remember where he was from. He married a woman from Guyana. And I knew he was Irish because he had a green hat on with a shamrock on it. I said, "You're Irish?" And he said, "Yeah." And I interviewed him, and he said, "Oh, my wife's from Guyana." So that was an interesting story as well. There's sort of he'd married a woman from the Caribbean. And
I'm looking at a picture here of Angela. Now, she was born in Cannes, from what I remember. But what I love is, and I love doing this on the radio, and I've done it a few times as well, talking to very old people about their memories, because it's so interesting for our audience to listen to. I remember talking to a woman here one day, and she was 104, 105. And she was telling me about the glimmer man who used to go around and put the street lights out because there were candles or gas lights in those days. And, and you talk to Angela, who talks about her first memories being the end of World War One. I mean, when you think about a memory of being the end of World War One, we're talking nearly 100 years ago. It's incredible.
I know. She's 109. I mean, it's the oldest person I've photographed.
Yeah, she's born in 1913. And she looks great.
Yeah, I mean, her daughter, it was lovely because her daughter, I told her, I said, could I photograph her? And her daughter said, well, come back. I'll make her look nice. But then it was delayed because her daughter was unwell, because her daughter, of course, is 85. So it's like an 85.
Of course, you don't think of that, do you really? Yeah.
No, and that's an amazing innings in itself, isn't it, to be 85? So I had to wait for her daughter to get better. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't have, that's not something I would have thought of, how old her daughter is. I mean, are there any stories of regrets, of, people who have deep regrets that they moved from either Ireland or other countries for that matter?
Do you know what? There are not many, actually. Most people seem to have sort of, I think what always amazes me about the really old people that I interview is the things that younger people would just think was absolutely catastrophic. They come to terms with as they get older. And there's a lady the other day who she married a guy that had what's that awful disease, Huntington's disease, and she didn't know. And she said she came over from Tunisia to live in England, and a year after she'd moved from England with 5 kids, he got the symptoms of it and died. And she said, I was on my own with 5 kids living in Stockwell. And she said, and then 3 of my kids got it, and they died. And she only had 2 kids left. But she said, I've had a good life, and I'm very happy, and I've still got my other 2 kids. And you think, my God, how it's amazing. It's because she's 96 or whatever. She just looks back on her life and just, I wouldn't change anything. It's very sad, but I had those children for the time I had them. I had my husband for the time I had them, And it really puts all my little worries and things into perspective. So it's been a very cathartic thing for me.
Yeah,
sort
of course.
meet
Yeah,
these
and,
people.
and also, I was looking at Gay, who's 100 years old, and she was surprised that she still got a letter from the Queen that was signed by the Queen. So it must have been signed before the Queen died, obviously. It must have been signed. That particular picture, by the way, and for people who want to go to your website, there was many of the pictures have got awards, actually. This particular was winner of the Portrait of Britain 2022. And it's a wonderful picture of Gay. And she's 100 years of age. I don't know how many, what do they call them, octogenarians there is now in Britain. I'm not too sure, but a lot more in Ireland, obviously. But it's just incredibly interesting, I think, to talk to people who have lived that long. And I spoke to a woman who was an Irish woman who lived in England, ironically enough, because they were talking about it. She was 108. And we had her on the air for her 108th birthday.
Well,
And I said to her, well, I tell you what we'll do. We look forward to talking to you next year for your birthday. And she said, oh, no, I won't be around. And I says, why won't you be around? She says, no, this is it now, she said. And I said, why? She says, because I'm bored, she said. I want to go.
yeah.
I was like, she was bored living, which I thought was an
Amazing.
incredible thing to say. And she was in good spirits, but she just said she was bored living.
I know, and that's the thing. Well, Michael's got no fear of death.
Yeah.
He has no religion. He just says, he lost his religion when he went to Artane, and he said that I just think nature replenishes itself, which is such a lovely sort of philosophical thing to say for a 98-year-old.
Yeah, that he'd be reborn as something else. Maybe he'll come out of the ground as something else, as a tree or something like that. But we're happy.
And that's his view, and he doesn't fear death. He said, I'd like to get to 100 just to prove. He said, but it's not a big deal to me.
Yeah.
He's just a very relaxed guy about that sort of thing.
And how do people react? By the way, for example, there was a picture there of I think it was Ivy and Jenny sitting in a cafe having their dinner, their chips, and what have you. And it's a very natural photograph, as if they didn't even know you were there. How do people react when you say, "Do you mind if I take a photograph of you?" Are they okay?
Surprisingly well, actually. I mean, occasionally you do get some, get told to get lost and stuff. But it's surprising how many people just go, yeah, okay. And some people are just brilliant because they just, immediately if they're going to be good. Because some people just look at the camera, just be themselves. Then other people do a great big sort of cheesy smile and think, oh God, I've got my work cut out here. Because then it suddenly looks like you're just taking a picture of your nan, or...
Yes, I want to know what they're talking about. See, because I'm looking at that photograph, right? And people can't see it, obviously, because it's radio, but I encourage people to go to the website. I'll give out the details in a second, but I'll describe it. It's two elderly ladies who look like the Golden Girls. And they're sitting in what would be one of these cafes that you would see at a market, I suppose, somewhere in Kempton, probably like that. And, opposite each other on a bench with their chips and cod. Looks like a cod and chips or sausages and chips. And one of them's got the sauce, and she's kind of shaking it, obviously, trying to, go from the top to the bottom. And the other one is kind of looking at her. And you'd kind of wonder what they're talking about or what their conversation is. I'm a bit of a people watcher. And I always wonder what the conversation is or what they're thinking about or what they're going to talk about.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because those two I photographed, and then a year later I was in the same cafe and I had a long chat with this woman, and it was her, and I had no idea because I'd forgotten, and she'd forgotten because a lot of old people do forget things. So there's another picture. There's another picture later on of the lady with a sort of shopping trolley, and that's the woman I photographed a sort of year before. And, you get that a lot with the older people. They're brilliant at recounting sort of their early lives, but if you said to them, like, what did you have for lunch yesterday, they can't remember, which is such a strange thing. I think your deep memory...
To be honest with you, that's not strange. I find that as I'm getting older, to be honest with you.
Well,
Jane will have to say to me, what were we talking about last night? And I go, I can't remember. What were we talking about 5 years ago? I can remember that all right, yeah. And so I think as you get older, that happens to everybody. You tend to forget what you were doing 5 minutes ago, but you can remember what you did 50 years ago. It's incredible. Well, look, it's a great website. And if people want to go along to the website, it's stevereevesphotographer.com. That's stevereevesphotographer.com. Jane will put a link up on our Classic Hits Twitter account there, Instagram. She does all that kind of stuff. So she'll do that and pop it up there. By the way, do you have any social media? Do you put these pictures up on Instagram or anything like that?
There's actually a lot more stuff on Instagram, and there's a lot more videos of Michael on Instagram because it's easier.
He seems to be he seems to be your most popular character, by the way. certainly. When it comes
Yeah,
to
and
photographs.
he's. I mean, I just got sent a massive box of Branston pickle, right? Because they saw in one of my videos he had a jar of Branston pickle, and they said, "This is for Michael." And so I've now got to take it round to his. He's not going to want it. I mean, it's like, he's got like 30 jars of Branston pickle. I mean, if he lived to 120, he wouldn't finish it. But I'll take it.
So are we warning people now not to send in Branston pickle? Okay, he has enough.
Yeah, please don't send him Branston pickle. But people
What's
have
your
been sending
what's
in
your
stuff.
Instagram account, by the way?
Steve Reeves. It's just Steve Reeves, photographer.
Okay, as in
At
Christopher
Steve
as well.
Reeves,
So it's spelled the
photographer.
same way. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's Steve or Eeves, Steve Reeves.
Yeah, Steve Reeves. There's a famous bodybuilder called Steve Reeves. That's not me.
So don't mistake it for some guy, with no top on and muscle showing. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, that's not me. He used to be Mr. Universe, and I'm not Mr. I'm Mr. Universe. So yeah.
I since the other day, Jane gave me the kind of the brief on this the other day, and I obviously had the link. And I've been looking at the photographs this other day, and I find them just so interesting. And I, as I said, I'm a people watcher anyway, so I just find the lives of other people extremely interesting. And I think people will find your pictures, and they're wonderful pictures. And I know you've got a lot of awards for many of your pictures as well. So you're better than me at taking photographs, by the way. My photographs end up half the head missing and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I'm really good at it. And one of the other ones that interested me was it looks like an old Irish bar, actually. It's like a bar I visited in Galway many, many years ago when I was a child. And there's a picture of a woman reading a magazine, Chanel magazine, or some sort of magazine anyway. But it's Alfreda. And I thought her story was really interesting. But I see her sitting there and she looks so interested. Did you say to her, pick up the magazine and pretend you're interested and I'll take a photograph? Or was she just naturally doing that?
No, I stole that shot. Yeah, I took that, and then she caught me. That's often what happens because I'm 6'5". I get caught. If I take a photo of someone, they look up and see me. And initially, I used to hate that, but now I actually quite like it because it's a sort of icebreaker. And I just said to her, "You looked amazing sitting there with you, reading your magazine." And then I got chatting to her. And to me, the writing is I think the writing is much more important than the photo. But it's always a bonus if you get a nice photo at the same time,
She has a very interesting life. She was born in Austria in 1932, and this was kind of not long before it became part of Nazi Germany, from what you were saying. So
Yeah.
she would have a lot of stories to tell. I'm absolutely sure of that.
She's met Omar Sharif and all sorts,
See, my younger audience are all saying, "Who's Omar Sharif?"
I know.
There you go. Lawrence of Arabia, folks. Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, some great stories. I mean, there's an amazing guy, an Irish guy. He's from Belfast. He's a Catholic from Belfast, and he now runs a pub in Hampstead, which is an amazing pub that people like Judi Dench go to. Peter O'Toole used to go to. It's a really sort of famous. It's a famous pub in Hampstead where lots of Ricky Gervais goes there. Lots of actors. And his stories are just incredible, But I can't fit that. That's one of my troubles with Instagram. I can't fit them all onto Instagram because there's a sort of character limit. So often the stories are a bit longer on the website, maybe too long in places, But on Instagram, you're limited how much you can write,
Yeah, and the other thing that's debilitating about Instagram is you can't put a link up to the photograph, or if people want a better version of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you ever have a problem, by the way, people stealing your photographs?
Not really, no, because I don't think they're that good. They're not really sort of like photos
They
you
are.
want to
Yeah,
put.
don't play yourself down here. They're excellent photographs.
Yeah, but you wouldn't
very
want to put them on your
natural.
wall. Yeah, they're natural. They're not sort of photos that are sort of aesthetically sort of beautiful. You wouldn't want a picture of someone else on your wall like that. I don't think anyway. So they're not that sort of. They're sort of, and what I think is there are other sites that do it, but I like the fact that there's a story behind the people, and I'm amazed how many stories I hear. Everyone I seem to talk to seems to find there's something that I find quite moving, or there's I don't know if you've seen the guy called Roy who he's got a leather jacket on, who went on a family holiday and his wife drowned in the sea in Florida. Just an amazing story, And you can't imagine that, can you? On holiday and then having to fly back with his 5-year-old and his wife had to fly in the hold, just unbelievable. But the guy was okay. He's got through it. He's brought up his daughter by himself, and he's overcome this amazingly horrific thing, and become a strong person from it, you know. And that, I love that. It's little human stories, and they're not famous people. They're not.
Some of them are a
not
bit sadder
celebrities.
as well. But I mean, that one you mentioned, and also, you know, there was a photograph of Susie, and
Yeah,
she doesn't-
Susie's very sad.
yeah, she doesn't look like she has much money. She doesn't look like she has much of a future, sadly. And
I think she's gone, actually.
I was going to say she's probably a lot younger than she looks.
Mm.
I can't remember how old she was or how old she said she was, but she looks about 70. But she's probably only about 40 years of age. She's had a lot of problems throughout her life, and you can tell a story by looking at somebody's face. Sometimes you can see that woman Susie has come on hard times, and she's had a lot of problems in her life. I don't know if it's drugs or whatever. You know.
Well, I think she also had Huntington's as well, but she was also an alcoholic, so you couldn't tell if it was her drinking or her illness. You know, it was a very.
And
it was very sad.
You think she's passed away now?
Yeah, I think she has. Because I walk along that street all the time. I used to see her all the time. I haven't seen her for about a year and a half. But there's a picture of her. I don't know if it's on the Instagram, but there's a picture of her back in the day. You know, she was a very attractive woman.
I see.
You know?
I've literally just gone back onto the site here now, and I see the picture of her that you're talking about with her hands up, like Joanna Lumley.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the blonde hair and looking really good. She's like a model. It's incredible the difference and what alcohol and what, you know, a bad life can do and unhealthy lifestyle can do to you. Anyway, but look, we go on about it all night. There's some wonderful photographs. And if people want to go to the website again, it's stevereevesphotographer.com. You can go on there and see all the photographs we've been talking about. I know it's radio and we're kind of trying to describe them, but I think it works well. They say that radio sometimes paints a million images in your head.
Yeah, you probably made it sound a lot better than it is. Yeah,
I don't think so. No, it is a great site. It's one of those sites that you go down. You know, you go down a rabbit hole. It's like TikTok. You go down a rabbit. You start looking at one picture. And you go, I'll just look at one more. It's 4:00 in the morning. I'll just look at one more. You know, it's one of those sites.
oh, it's
Steve.
nice of you to say.
Fair play to you. And by the way, the book, which comes out next year on St. Patrick's Day, which will be a book of all these pictures.
All the Irish ones, yeah. I'm just going to get them all together, and it'll come out on St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, that's the plan.
It's a good plan, isn't it, St. Patrick's Day? Yeah.
Yeah, and if anyone knows any elders who are still living in England, London in particular, you know, anyone out there that have got, my old granny's still over there. I will go and visit her and photograph her, and because I could do with a few more stories, you know. So, you know, I'm on the hunt still, you know.
And I'm assuming they can contact you through your website. There's a contact button on the website somewhere. I assume,
on my Instagram or my website, and I will. And I always, everyone I photograph, I give them a print to say thank you.
Yeah.
And they don't normally want it, but their grandchildren often do, because you very rarely get someone taking a proper photo of you. You know, it's normally just a snap on your phone. Yeah. So it's nice to have a nice...
Yeah, those days are gone. I remember, you know, we used to have, in my mum and dad's house, you know, you'd have these albums under the bed with, like, photographs of all our family holidays, and they were all printed out, obviously. Nowadays, we don't print photographs anymore. They're just on our phone. It's just not the same, is it?
And it's a nice thing, because, I mean, one of the ladies died, Gloria, and her granddaughter said, have you got a copy of the photo of her? And I went round, and the granddaughter had gone out, and the mother was there. And she didn't even know that I'd taken the photos. And she saw these big, I printed big, and she burst into tears and said, "It's such a beautiful picture of my mum, you know, who died like a week before." And it was it was very touching, you know, to give this. And they used it at the funeral. They put it up on a little easel.
I was going to say they probably used it, for the eulogy and all that, but used it on the coffin.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed. And I'm sorry we've run out of time, but we have.
No, thanks for talking to me. Cheers.
Thank you very much indeed.
Real people, real opinions, real talk radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.